fact, when you go into the real understanding of our reality, there is no such thing as true nothingness in existence, for there is always a something creating everything, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we know that this relative entity came into existence by something that is outside the world of relativity. Meaning, in a relative world, there is a frame of reference. I'm talking to you, I have a certain distance. What does relativity mean? Let me explain. Frame of reference. Interesting phenomenon. Einstein was watching this very simply, and that's why he, geniuses sometimes, when you watch them, you find the very basic observation, and they can see something which the average does not see, takes it for granted. Einstein was on a train moving. He looked outside and he saw the homes passing him at 50 miles per hour, approximately. The other side, and there was another train running parallel with him, and he saw somebody in the other train, and he found the other person is not moving relative to him. He says, that's interesting. I'm moving at 50 miles per hour. The house is moving away from me 50 miles per hour, but this person in the other train is not moving away from me at all. That's interesting. He says, I throw a ball in the train, it lands right on my hand. But I threw the ball upward. It didn't move forward, but I'm moving forward. I said, that's interesting. The ball is moving with me forward. So relative to the frame of reference, things change instantaneously. And what Einstein saw was that based on your frame of reference, things can shift rapidly. Let me give an explanation. Me, as a person, I am extremely huge. I'm massive with relations to an atom. And at the same time, at the same moment, I am extremely small relative to the universe. So I was huge, at the same time, very small. One say, how is that possible? Exactly. It's based on the frame of reference. What do you refer to? What's your angle? In science, if you say to someone, this room is approximately 500, the scientist or the observer or the human being with common sense will tell you, 500 what? Miles, years, yards, cubic feet, cubic meters? What do you mean? It's senseless. Really, it's a senseless statement. This room is 500. 500 what? Nonsensical statement. Mind doesn't compute. Has absolutely no concept of what I just said. But once I give it a frame of reference, everything makes sense. So we are living in a world of relativity where the frame of reference is fundamental to my existence, my tongue, my eyes, my relativity, my language, my expressions, everything I'm using is bound within the frame of reference. Take it out, you cease to exist. And therefore, humankind cannot function outside the frame of reference. Everything Allah has created is bound under the frame of reference. It needs a time, it needs a matter, and it needs a space. That is why there is a problem with the human race in understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He insists on bringing the Creator into the frame of reference, and that is where the problem lies. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Time is a creation. If Allah is bound in time, how can He create it? If He's bound in space, how can He make it? If He's bound in matter, how can He make it? He is outside this entity. You drop any one of those three elements, relativity stops. And if relativity stops, then logic asks the question, if it's not relative, then what is it? If it lacks the frame of reference, then what is it? And you find there is no other answer but absolute. The definition of absolute means it has no frame of reference. It does not occupy matter. It does not occupy space. It is not bound in time. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduces Himself in the Holy Quran. In Ayat al-Kursi, says, Allahu la ilaha illahu al-hayyul qayyum la ta'akhuduhu sinatun wa la nawm. Allah is He. And Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam explains, he says, if you could understand that the depth of that statement, Allah is He. He says, go deep. He says there is no explanation further than the absolute, and the relative mind can never comprehend it. But because the relative mind is so limited, Allah has allowed himself to be acknowledged through these 99 blessed names, only because man is so limited, but Allah is certainly not bound in 99 names. So mankind says, where is God? Our Prophet replies, tell me where he is not, so I can tell you where he is. Who created God? Tell me when he did not exist, so I can tell you when he was created. Look at the answer. When someone says, where did God come from? Look at the questions. Every question I just asked are all relative questions. It is not in the domain of Allah. If I say to you, I was walking on a street and I saw a fish walking. Exactly. The brother just laughed. Why? Because fish don't walk, they swim. Thank you. Allah is not bound in time, matter, and space. So please don't ask those silly questions. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. But we know that he's there. The absolute had to be there. For the relative to exist, it had to be there. So when the atheist asks you, he came by accident, he's barking up the wrong tree, for he knows very clearly that he cannot come into existence until there's something that made him. Who is this something? And it cannot be bound in the relative domain, so don't you dare ask the question, what created him? For that question is an irrelevant question. So when people ask, how does God know the future? How does Allah know what will happen to me tomorrow? This is a very basic question we all ask. Look at the question. It's related to time. How does Allah know tomorrow? Tomorrow is not in the domain of Allah. Allah is not bound by yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He is not in that domain. You and I are in that domain, not him. So to ask Allah, how do you know tomorrow, is an absurd question. For that question belongs to the relative being, not to the absolute being. So we should never ask the question, how does Allah know tomorrow? To Allah there is no tomorrow. To Allah everything is Allahu. La ilaha illahu. There is no God but He. But look how we humans constantly bring God into the relative world. All those other religions, the pantheists, the polytheists, the ones who equate a son to God, bring God in the relative domain. So what do they say? They say God created the universe in 6 days, and the 7th day He rested. God got tired. See? Anthropomorphizing. We are making God in the relative world now. Bring Him down. Bring Him to our level. Shape Him. Kick Him. Believe me, you'll be surprised what people do to God in their shapes. That's human nature. Once you make a shape of Him, you've got Him. You can choke Him. I was talking to my Hindu friends and I was saying, you have many shapes of God. How do you know this is God? Have you seen Him? I said, no, we haven't seen Him. You can't see God. But that's my imagination. I said, look, when you go into that temple and that God with that elephant nose, is that your imagination or somebody 5,000 years ago's imagination? She said, well, it's one and the same. I said, no, it's not the same. If you really want to worship God with your imagination, you should go with that which you think is God. Maybe a Ferrari, maybe a statue of something you like, maybe an idol of some famous actor. Then you take it to the temple. And the person says, no, no, we can't do that. I said, precisely. I said, now let me ask you a question. If I made, and by the way, why do you like this statue so much? He says, oh, I love God very much. I said, what if you liked me very much and you had a very nice imagination of me and you sort of made a kind of a combination creature of a fish, a human, and an animal, and you combined him with 7 arms and 7 heads and the rest, you know. And then you say, this is you. Now tell me, any sane creature, if they could verbalize their emotions, what do you think will come out of their mouth? an expression of damnation, for it will tell you, how dare you equate me to this imagination? The way I am is the way I am. When you draw a picture of me, draw the way I am.